All righty.
Right, anyone.
Good morning, everyone. Today's forum is presented by SpedNet Wilton in partnership with Wilton Youth Council, Wilton Library, Newtown Sped PTA, and our Wilton Public Schools. We are so grateful for our community partners. Today, we have Dave Sylvestro here to discuss encouraging responsibility and independence. He will provide important tips on how we can weave planned obsolescence into our parenting. I love that. Dave served as school psychologist at Eagle Hill Schools for over 35 years and is currently the school psychologist at the Southport School. He facilitates individual and group counseling sessions, parent support groups, and dads-only groups, provides training and staff development to professionals, and presents at LD conferences worldwide. For your information, we are sponsoring a 6-week support group series with Dave beginning on February 15th. Each week, Dave will facilitate discussion on important topics related to raising kids with special needs. Space is limited. There's the handout. Thank you, Lena. Space is limited, but we still have a couple more slots available. So if you'd like to register, we will post the registration link after the end of this presentation. Also, please check out our new website at www.spednetwilton.org, where you can access videos from our webinars, PowerPoints, and related materials and articles about special education matters. Our acclaimed guide to special services, Bringing Knowledge to the Table, How to Be an Effective Advocate for Your Child, is also featured on our site. And you can donate to SpedNet Wilton through our website. SpedNet Wilton is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and 100% of donations are put directly back into programming. We greatly appreciate your support. Our SpedNet Wilton board is here today to answer any questions after the presentation. Eve Kessler, Executive Director and co-founder of SpedNet Wilton, Co-President Carolina Corrigan, and I'm Janine Kelly. We also have Andrea Sato here from the Wilton Library Adult Programming Department. Welcome, Andrea.
Thanks, Janine. On behalf of the Wilton Library, I just want to welcome you to today's important and informative seminar. We're so happy to partner with SpedNet, the Wilton Youth Council, and the Wilton Public Schools on topics like this that help all of us talk to our kids in a more productive way. And I'm so excited that we have so many people on this webinar today. It's great. It's just great. We at Wilton Library are proud to continue to offer the community critical and informative sessions such as this one. So with that, I'll just turn it back to Janine. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Just a few ground rules. We will leave time at the end of the presentation for questions. Please type them into the Q&A and not the chat, as questions are much easier to keep track of that way. Also, please be mindful this is an open forum that's being recorded. You may not want to reveal any private information that you don't want out there in the public forum because we cannot guarantee protecting your confidentiality. Also, any information provided in this presentation by Dave or the SpedNet Wilton board is not intended to be legal or therapeutic advice. The information and discussion are for general information purposes only. And with all of that said, I will turn it over to Dave. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you, Janine, and thank everybody else. And I know that I'm speaking for everybody who's on the webinar when I say how appreciative I am for all of the things that SpedNet does, the talks that you put on, the resources that you provide for parents. Just being there provides such a sense of security for people who are on a journey that was sort of unexpected for them. We really appreciate that. And I just love the fact that you keep inviting me to come do these talks. Okay, what I'm going to do now is to share my screen. Could you please, if 50 people cross their fingers, it may happen the right way. Fingers crossed. Is it working for you? Okay, good. All right. What we're going to talk about today is something that has been sort of one of the bedrock concepts of our school for a long time, in that we are a school for the Eagle Hills and the Southport School, are schools for kids who have learning disabilities. And it's a school that works really well, and we can get kids to be confident when they're there, and get kids to be differently organized, and get kids to be more skilled in a variety of different things that's going to allow them to succeed at school. But what's really important is that we prepare kids for life outside of our school, traditional school, and we don't have our kids forever. And so it's really important that as we are building skills, we are also teaching our kids, because there's teaching involved, to be independent and to be responsible and to be accountable. And so this talk today is sort of an accumulation of too many years to count of working with kids this way. And if I may start with I'm gonna hopefully go to the next slide. Hopefully go to the next slide. Okay. I'm gonna start with a quick anecdote, and I promise, Lena, that this is apropos to the topic. Whenever we do conversations like this, like encouraging responsibilities and being positive, it makes me think that way. And so because of this presentation today, I think I was better at my job yesterday when one of my kids at school had a test in his science class. And he, as far as he was concerned, he blew the test, and it would really upset him because he's concerned about going to high school next year, and he has, questions about his academic abilities and all those sorts of things. And so had a chance to speak with him at the end of the day, and I asked him, what he thought the problem was. And he said, well, I didn't study. And so I'm thinking, okay, instead of just calling him a dingbat and say, why didn't you study? We kind of talked about that. And over the course of the discussion, we came up with the idea, again, with the idea of keeping this positive. I said that sometimes we let our successes in other arenas kind of affect our performance and our preparation in different arenas. He's an enormously talented musician. And if he hears a song, he can play it in the drums and he can play it on the guitar and he can do these things. Almost an instantaneous learner when it comes to that. He's not such an instantaneous learner when it comes to things that he reads and things that he hears in class. And so we talked about the fact that he can be duped into thinking that he doesn't need to study because of the experience that he has in other areas. And maybe that we can make a plan that's going to allow him to sort of get over that and see that studying for factual information and remembering factual information and for things that he reads needs a different process. So we talked about 3 different things that he can try for the next time. But I was really thinking about this topic when I was saying, okay, he doesn't need to be yelled at for being a dingbat for not studying. He feels bad enough about it already. And so my job was to sort of help him get over that hump. So that wasn't bad, right, Lena? That was okay. Okay, good. All right. Okay, so this is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about, you would think that we all want our kids to be independent and we all want our kids to be responsible and we all want our kids to contribute to the home. Why can it be so difficult when we have kids with special needs to make that leap from having us be their frontal lobe and have us be the person who are always sort of moving them into doing some things that they don't necessarily want to and they're not necessarily drawn to do? Why is it particularly hard with our kids? So we're going to talk a little about that. And we're going to talk about when in families, as well as in classrooms, when our flexibility morphs into rigidity, that the ways that we had to be flexible to accommodate for the way that our kids learn and the way that our kids socialize and the way that our kids participate in the family sometimes creates situations where our kids become fiercely dependent on those accommodations that we were making, and sometimes to the detriment of their moving forward toward independence and responsibility. And then the dread rut of abling, the things that we have come to do naturally because our kids need us to do it. The kids need us to be the buffer between themselves and their schools for a while. They need us to be the buffer between themselves and their teams so that we can explain some things to their coaches. They need us to be buffers in order for us to make them able to do these things. We need to find a way to decide when abling becomes enabling, that we are assuming too much of the responsibility and they are not learning how to assume it themselves. And then we're talking about positivity and the way that we can adjust our communication to be more positive. That actually results in behavior change more than negative attitudes that we can have. And then we'll do questions and answers at the end. Does that make sense? Yes? Okay, so characteristics of our kids that put us in a position where we need to be exceptional parents. For so many of our kids, when we have support groups, parents are talking about, I sort of had the sense that there was something up pretty early on when I saw other kids being able to do things physically that my kid wasn't being able to do, or that my kid was very advanced physically and not being able to make good judgments as to whether or not he should jump from the top of the slide and do those things. And when we have kids who are more withdrawn or more like bull in a china shop sorts of things, we know early on. So we have to sort of make some accommodations for our kids. And the reason that is that sometimes the kids have language issues, both expressive and receptive. They used to call learning disabilities language, developmental delays, and they did that for a reason. There's a guy, George McCloskey, who talks about the fact that assume that our kids with special needs, particularly kids with learning disabilities and ADHD, are functioning about a third behind their like age peers in the areas that are particularly affected by their particular learning disability. So if they're 12, expect them to be able to respond to the things that we're asking to and move forward at the rate that we would expect them to, more like an 8 or a 9-year-old in certain areas. And they also have attentional issues and distractibility and hyperactivity, which means that the really sound things that we say, the brilliant guidance that we are providing our kids, sometimes they're not paying attention to it if we don't make sure that we are doing things to check that they're paying that attention. They have ineffective emotional modulation, that sometimes they move from one emotion to another erratically, almost quantumly, and that has a direct impact on their participation in the family, certainly participation in the social world, and also in schools. Our kids have low frustration tolerance, and we understand that because a lot of times, no matter how hard they've tried to do some of the things that everybody else seems to be able to do, they've not been able to do that. And there is a certain capacity that we have to tolerate effort when there's not the results that we are looking for. So that can breed low frustration tolerance as well. Social skills issues, yeah, when we talk about language, expressive language and receptive language, particularly as kids get to be adolescents and in middle school, language is the culture, is the currency of friendships. That the way that we can communicate, the way that we can understand both the content of what is being said, as well as the body language and the tone of voice and the feelings that are expressed behind the words, that's how we can form friendships. That's how we let people know that we can be good friends and reliable friends. And so when you have language issues, social skills are likely to, not always, likely to follow close behind. Variability in performance, that we see that in our kids all the time, that when they can do the same degree of preparation for 3 different quizzes, and the first 2 they knock out of the park, and the third one it's just not there, and they don't do well in that particular evaluation. And it has nothing to do with that preparation. It has to do with what they're bringing to the table every day. Our kids are notorious for bringing a different set of skills and availability for learning to the class on different days. We want to stretch that out. We want to help them stay more consistent and help them do those things that work with a greater frequency, but we also understand that sometimes they just have bad days. And that can be really frustrating, again, for kids with low frustration tolerance. Also, our kids are slow developers. We talked about that before, that a lot of times when it comes to physical abilities, certainly language abilities, and in social skills, our kids are sometimes not as facile to be able to learn kind of through osmosis and from observing the way that other kids enter groups, for example, other kids, the leaf groups, other kids resolve conflicts. They are slower to develop those skills because they have to be taught. And they tend to be poor risk takers. And that they sort of have a hard time judging when it's okay to take risks and when it's not okay to take risks. Particularly when our kids are younger, if they happen to be physically adept, that they may find themselves in some situations that make us cringe and sometimes make them bleed, because they don't judge the consequences very well. They're also poor risk takers in the other sense, in that they don't like changes, and they don't like things often. They don't like things that are new. And so when it's time to move on to a different skill or a different concept in math class, they're reluctant to engage in that. And sometimes the way that they show that is by being silly, or by being resistive, or by having even a lower frustration tolerance for things that don't go the way that they want them to. So that's the poor risk taking, and also disorganization. We call that executive function now, that there are so many things about the way that they monitor themselves, the way that they are able to manage their time, the way that they're able to initiate projects. That's just a difficult thing for them. And when we guide them through that process, it's important, as you all know, that guidance isn't a one and done situation. We have to continue to do that. Okay, does that make sense? I'm looking for, okay, good, thank you. Situations, wait, how do I get rid of this little thing here? Situations related to parents of learning disabilities that may compound our parenting issues. It's where we are in our own lives. We devote so much time, so much energy, so much mental energy, so much emotional energy to our kids that sometimes we forget that we're kind of human beings too. And we have demands on our life that are related to work, that are related to family, that are related to a variety of different things that are having an impact on us. And so it makes us sometimes less tolerant of frustration. It makes us variable in our performance when we want to be there for our kids, and we need to factor that in. And it's nothing that we feel guilty about. It's just that we have to understand that when we are not there for our kids to the degree that we have been there for our kids, or the degree that we want to be there for our kids, it's kind of not that we're slackers. It's not that we're not trying, that we are surprisingly enough human beings too. And particularly in this area, child raising is seen as a measure of our value as adults. Our kids sometimes can behave unpredictably, if that's fair. Sometimes don't perform in a way that is going to be stellar in their class. Sometimes are going to be awkward in social situations. And sometimes what the things that come out of their mouths may not be exactly sort of careful and sensitive and empathic words. And when these things happen in public, it's hard for us. We can't help but being sort of chagrined at the way that our kids perform in public. That's natural, that's normal. The most important thing about that, we're going to feel it, but we can't let it dominate. But it is kind of hard. I mean, we live in a world where a lot of golden boys and girls out there who seem to be swimming through life without any resistance at all, that things come easily for them socially, athletically, academically. And that doesn't happen to be our kids. In the back of our minds, it's good for us to realize that the fact that our kids have been used to dealing with adversity, the fact that we as people have had to really maximize our flexibility and our willingness to learn and to try things different and to take risks ourselves, it's going to make better. It's going to make better kids. The kids who are floated through high school and then go to college, and it's challenging for them, and they're away from home, and they're not used to being number one. That can be really, really a trying thing for kids. And sometimes they fall off the rails. Our kids have dealt with difficulties for a long time. And I wish that for you in the audience who have peewees, who have kids who are less than 10, can have the opportunity sometime to talk with some of our kids who are now older kids, who have been through the things that your kids have been through. And they can talk with them about how what that path was like for them, and what are some of the key things that they were able to use to get there. And the proclivity for polysyllabic pedagogical pronouncements. I can't believe I just said that. Sometimes we talk too much. Sometimes the things that we want to express to our kids are so important that we want to make sure that they get it. And so we want to tag a lot of words to it. And I think that's natural. That's not bad, but it means that we have to do checkpoints along those things that we talk with our kids, along those pronouncements, just to make sure that they're listening. Current status of relationships with our spouse. Raising kids with special needs is an adventure. And there are choices that we're making all the time. Our kids don't have automatic pilots so much. And so we don't have automatic pilots so much. And so we are in a position to make more decisions than parents of kids who are neurotypical kids than others. And whenever there are decisions to be made that are shared with two people, there's an opportunity for differences of opinion if that's kind. And so, and that's another whole talk at some point. But that can have an impact on the way that we are present for our kids in the way that we want to be. And the particular pressures of where and when we leave, where we live. Fairfield County and Connecticut in where we are, there's a lot of pressure due to affluence and competitiveness and cornucopia kids and neighborhood issues, where kids are comparing not only their performance, but their things. And the hurried child syndromes. We are busy people. We have a lot of things on our plate. And when we have a lot of things on our plate, we are also people who are used to achieving. And so if we have a lot of things on our plate, we want to do those things well. And sometimes being the parent that we need to be for our kids runs headlong into those things that we want to be with our job. And so we are maybe asking and demanding things of our kids that they're just not ready to do. And so that happens. None of these things, of course, happens to anybody who's in the audience, but just for other people, just to let them know. And the fact that our kids have had a diagnosis of a learning disability or other sort of exceptionality. We have when our kids are born, we have sort of this image of what it's going to be like to be a parent of our kid, and what their path is going to be like, and what it's going to be like for them in school and on the athletic field, and if they're going to be dancers, if they're going to be artists, or what is going to be. When we have our kids in reality and we see that something is amiss and they're not performing so well, and we get an evaluation, and then we hear that our kids and our family will be facing sort of a kind of a detour from that path that we have imagined. The stages that we go through are very similar to the stages that we go through with grieving the loss of a loved one. And the way that this has been described by Rick Lavoie and others, that we're almost grieving the loss of this idealized image of what our lives will be like with our kids. And so all of these things that are in the screen in front of you, on the screen in front of you, that happens. We first of all said, no, I'm not thinking this is going to be right. It's got to be a different diagnosis. It was a bad day when he got tested. And then we have fear, oh my God, I'm not going to be up for this. There's too many things that I don't know. And all of it, we go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And then we come to the idea that, okay, that image is yesterday's image. We have to get a new image for tomorrow. We have to be different parents. We have to be a different family. We have to be a different couple. We have to be much more actively engaged with our schools, that we have to be actively engaged in providing social worlds for our kids. And that's when we sort of, get up, dust ourselves off, do this with our hands, whatever they call that, and then we move on. We sort of consolidate this new image of what is going to be for our family, and we accept it, and we move on, we do actions. Does that make sense? Yes. I'm assuming that it makes sense. And this is when, let me see, when I can't read that top thing. It says when modifications and adjustments become contortions. Okay, this is what I was talking about before. When we sort of instinctively sometimes flex with the needs of our kids, and that we know that it's time to do something in a different way, that we're going to encourage independence and a different level of responsibility when we feel that these routines need to be etched in stone, that any deviation from the routine causes a meltdown on our kids, or that it has an impact on them that is going to have, reverberations that go throughout the day. That we find that we're more often doing things for our kids than with our kids. And again, that can be something that we've worked really hard to create the situation of stasis with our kids, and it keeps them happy and it keeps some peace in the family, that we just do those things instinctively, even beyond the time when we don't need to do those things anymore. And that's the trick of recognizing when that happens. And that we have a store of bribes and incentives that needs to be bottomless, that we need to be able to sort of incentivize the things that we want our kids to do every time we want them to do it, rather than having them assume some of the responsibility of doing these tasks on their own. Part of it is the way that the semantics can be important, that, when we tell our kid it's time to do their chores, maybe a different word besides chore. Chore may sound good if you're on the farm in the pioneer days, but at this particular point, it seems like a tedious thing to do. Maybe we talk about them differently, that this is their contribution to the family. This is their personal responsibility, whatever it's going to be. And we have to move them away from, needing treats every time they do that. A lot of times we kind of isolate ourselves. When our kids struggle in social situations, we avoid social contact because we don't want them to have a hard time in public. And this is a big one too, and another whole talk, that we need to downplay the kids who don't have special needs, or siblings who don't have special needs. We need to downplay those accomplishments, because we don't want our kids who are not accomplishing at the same level to feel badly about the fact that they're not measuring up. And we have many excuses for the child's misbehavior in public. And there are many more of these things. And so these are some of the things that when we are not feeling comfortable, when we're feeling twitchy, when we're chafing a little bit about the structure that we have in the family, think about some of these things and say, okay, maybe these modifications, I'm not only beginning to resent them, and that may be some of the things that we really feel, honestly. And then we say, okay, if we resent them, what am I going to do about that? How can I take that feeling of resentment and do something positive about that? Okay, makes sense, yes? When abling becomes enabling, when the things that we do for the kids become things that we do that are preventing them from moving forward. When we inevitably end up doing tasks that our kids are assigned to do, that, cleaning the kitty litter, we ask the kids to do it and they don't do it. And then we don't remember to check. And then when we do remember to check, the kids aren't there so that we can make them do it. So we do it ourselves. And that becomes very much part of the routine. We see regression in the face of new experiences. When our kids are faced with a new task, a new grade, a new concept, a new thing that's happening with the family, that the kids regress, which is a sign then that we need to help kids gradually get used to doing new things and sort of make up new things that the kid's going to do to get them used to that. We begin to fear that we'll never see independence, that we see, and this is just going to be the way that it is because he resists moving forward. And we read that resistance as a limitation on our kids' part, as opposed to maybe a limitation on the way that we are helping our kids grow, if that makes sense. Expedience wins out over instruction always, that it's easier for us to do the things. It is less time consuming for us to do these things. And so rather than teaching kids how to perform a particular task, set the table, do the dish, whatever it's going to be, we always do it because we just sometimes don't have the time to teach. that we alter expectations because we fear explosive responses. That sometimes when we bump up the level of expectations for our kids, they resist that because they're kids sometimes. The first foray is to, no, I'm not going to do it. And when we do that and we back down, that is going to be the MO of our kids and the way that they respond to new things. And sometimes we have to weather the explosive response and get them used to doing things that are going to be different. So have them get used to the experience of having added responsibilities as opposed to avoided responsibilities all the time. And there's more whining. Oh my God, there's more whining than in the Tuscan village in September. They're, you know, why do I have to do it? I can't do it enough to be really convincing, but I think everybody knows what it is. That in the face of disappointment in terms of their not being able to do the things that they're wanting to do, whether watch TV or play a video game or do something, and they respond that they whine about that we can't respond to that in a way that backs off from those expectations if we want our kids to be independent, if I want our kids to learn how to be responsible, if we want to really experience some of the delight of planned obsolescence as parents. Positive interactions promote independence. And these are just some questions that we have when we feel that those other things are happening, that our expectations for our kids clear and predictable. I mean, it's one thing for us to understand and program for different things that we want our kids to do, and we talk with them. Are we making sure that when we talk with them, the things that we say are clear, that the kids are really understanding what we're having to say? Do we ask them to repeat the things and tell us what that means to them? Because these are important, and it's good to know that though we may think that we've done a most excellent job outlining what the expectations are, it's really important for us to know what the kids are perceiving and how the kids are receiving that. Do you frequently give your kids praise and recognition? For our kids, they put us in a position where we are correcting a lot. Sometimes there are a lot of missteps, sometimes of a minor misstep nature and sometimes of a major misstep nature. We know and we feel it when the negative responses from us far outnumber the positive responses. And when we feel that, that's when we take a step back and say, okay, maybe what I need to do is to sort of consciously look for things that our kids that are doing well that may be relatively minor in nature, but it sort of gives us an opportunity to layer real praise on our kids for the things that they're doing. Do our kids hear positively stated commands more often than messages that relate to no? That when we ask kids to do something, when we set up expectations and parameters for our kids, are we doing it in a positive way? Or is it you do this or else, which is what we feel sometimes, but it may not be the most effective way to set these things up. And do you set limits and then follow through reliably? Reliably is better a word than consistently, because all of the things we're going to talk about today, there's some element of pie in the sky. We can't always be the parents that we want to be, and we can't always be the parents that all of this stuff is advising us to be. We just need to make sure that when we can, and when we're feeling particularly stressed, that we can think of these things as a way to retool to be differently positive as to be differently punitive, if that makes sense. Okay. All right. Moving our kids in a positive direction. Okay. We often get, when kids are acting out in class, they get more teacher attention. When the kids are being dingbats at the dinner table, they get more of our attention. When kids are struggling on a team and they're not being compliant, they get more attention. That's kind of natural. If we know that that's natural, then what we have to do is not break nature, because that's not going to happen, but we can add to that. And what we can add to is to retool our focus and retool our perception to make sure that even while there are things that need correction, there are also some things that are showing improvement and that are positive and that are compliant. And we may think that those are at such a low level, it's not going to mean anything to kids. That's just not true. Because when we had older kids, particularly when we were new at this down in Greenwich, that when you go by the classes of the little kids and you'd see the papers outside the board, outside their classroom. Some of our kids who are 14, 15 years old, when we have a bulletin board in the class and we put up some prize work of the kids, their first thing was, oh, that's ridiculous. I don't need that stuff on the board. And then 3 weeks later, they do something and they said, can I put this on the board? Because kids like acknowledgement. Kids like it when we notice that they're making improvement. Kids like it when we notice progress toward goals. They really like it when we notice achievement of goals, but it's really important that we give kids praise and acknowledgement on their way to achieving those goals. Okay. And we're at our best when we're communicating goals rather than sins, that we let kids know that we understand what they are trying to do. And this boy that I was talking with yesterday who flubbed up his science test, I said, your teacher knows, and you know that you want to do better than this particular score. So that is where we're starting. So let's figure out a way to get you toward those goals rather than focus on, dingbat, you didn't study. Let's focus on, okay, this is what you consider to be unacceptable performance. What are we going to do together? How can I help you move toward a greater performance? Use our mouths and our ears to communicate. It's really important that when we are talking with our kids, the with part is important, that we need to also encourage kids to be able to talk as well, and to let kids know that we are listening to what they say. Even if we don't agree with them, it is good to say, okay, let me see if I understand you right, and restate what they say. And when that happens and they say, yep, that's what I'm saying, and it's okay, I understand where you're coming from. This is my perspective on that. And it's a little bit different. And consciously use our tone of voice, cadence, and volume for impact when we're talking with our kids. On those times when we can manage our frustration, and it's not always, but when we can manage our frustration, use emphasis, use tone of voice, use these things to really punch the most important parts of what we're saying to our kids, rather than just being explosive, which is going to happen sometimes. But we're better if we can do it the other way. Praise power, positive evaluation of behavior or production. That's what praise is. Most of us overestimate the amount of praise that we give. And I think what's a really good rule of thumb is that if we want our kids to feel confident enough to take the risk to be more independent, to handle more responsibilities, let's shoot for 5 to 1. And I don't want people getting an app that counts praises for negative responses. It's just keep in mind that the more positive that we can be, the more effective we're going to be as parents, if that makes sense. Don't count. Okay, this is a couple of examples of positive talk. Okay, a kid doesn't complete his homework. If we want to, instead of chastising them for not completing his homework, let's look at, okay, he completed part of it. And so when we talk with our kids, we can say, hey, that's a nice job completing number 1, 2, and 4. Do you need help with the rest? Rather than focusing on what is not done, let's focus on what is done as a springboard to get the other stuff done. Does that make sense? Yes, yes? Yes, okay, good. A kid begins to interrupt his sister's story at the dinner table again, because this is what he does all the time. And when the kid stops, when you sort of look at him about that and he stops, that's a huge thing. It's an opportunity for saying, you shouldn't interrupt your sister. That is an opportunity to say that. But it's also an opportunity to say, wow, good stopping. Thanks for letting her finish your story without being told. That's really good. A step in the right direction. And it seems a little bit counterintuitive that if we don't point out the mistakes, the kids aren't going to change them. That's just not the way the word no works in this brain of ours. It just doesn't work. Okay, I'm going to say, ready? Do not imagine an ice cream cone. What do you have in your head? A picture of an ice cream cone, because we don't process not that way. We process the good things, the positive things. When teachers are in their classrooms and they put up sort of the class expectations, it's something. Don't interrupt. Don't speak out without raising your hands. We always say, okay, let's retool this. Let's talk about. Be patient when other people are talking. Wait for acknowledgement. Those sorts of things, rather than using don'ts. Make sense? Yes. A team returns 25 minutes after curfew, and the kid has been pretty good about sticking to her curfew. And as much as we're nervous and angry about that, just say, acknowledge it. You've been showing that you meet your curfew pretty well. What happened tonight? What happened tonight? And then you can do an if, when then statement. I said, okay, when it happens again, we have to maybe retool some of this stuff and do something different. Bedroom is still 50% messy after an hour of cleaning it. We have to look at the fact that half of it's clean. Nice beginning here. What part should you do after a little break? That sort of thing would be more encouraging than not. And to understand that an hour cleaning the room for our kids is interminable. Interminable. An hour doing anything is interminable. Let's let them know that we are going to give them a break, because we recognize that. And let's celebrate that half this is done, and then we go in, okay, what should we do next? Yes. Okay. And we can be positive spin doctors, and I'm not going to go through all of these because they're pretty clear. A lot of our kids describe themselves with the red words on the left, that they say that they're lazy, that they're dumb, that they're bad, that the problem get unmotivated, blah, 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 blah. Those things. We can tag those feelings that the kids are having with different words that are not false, but they're a different spin on the concept that the kids are talking about. So, when the kids say, well, and my kid yesterday, when I asked him why I didn't study, he said, because I'm just too lazy to do that. I said, well, maybe not. Maybe you were duped. Maybe you're a little bit duped. And when we reframe those things for the kids in a more positive way, it gives them something to aspire to. Does that make sense? Do I need to go through all of these? I don't think so, right? Okay. Go to the next page. What does it say on the top? Positive, whatever it is. Whatever you can read is the title. That's what it is. Okay. These are the things that we can do when we find areas of friction and areas that are not going so great, and we feel the pressure to do something different. These are some things that we can try to do as part of that process. That, we can clearly identify the problem. If we feel as though everybody in the family, for example, is contributing by doing something, certainly the parents and the siblings and doing some things, and our kid with special needs is not doing something, and it just doesn't feel right, we have to make some sort of change. So let's identify the problem with the kid. And it doesn't mean that he has to do everything that everybody else is doing, but that some sort of contribution is important. So when you identify the problems, you tease out the ancillary and the less significant details. Okay, we could do a laundry list of things that are the problems. Kids are going to tune out of that laundry list after the second one, and so the rest of it just comes blah blah blah. And if the kids have tuned us out for those things, it's going to be really hard for them to tune back into the important stuff. And we can focus on the main issues, and we can check frequently for understanding. I know that I've got a blabbermouth and I talk too much. One of the things that I've learned is that I really do. I said, okay, I think that was really important. And I just used a lot of words. Tell me what I just said. Kids appreciate that. And when the kid says, I have no clue, I don't say, well, for crying out loud, why don't you pay attention? I say, thanks for that. Let me try again. And I chunk it in smaller bits and see if they understand it that way. Does that, I hope that makes sense too. Okay. And then choose the right time to talk. The closer to the event, to whatever, if there was some conflict, the closer the event is better, obviously, but we have to make sure that the less heat, the better. If either party is really, really angry, it's not the best time. We're not the best communicators when we're angry, and our kids aren't the best listeners when they're angry. So we have to find a way to sort of take a little bit of a hiatus and then say, you know what I need to do is to, cool off a little bit, because my frustration is getting the better of me. I'm not the best at talking about this stuff. When that happens, I'm going to take a little break and we'll talk about this in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever you want to do. The fewer the eyes, the better. Though a lot of times our kids make infractions in public, it is rarely, and I'm saying rarely just because you should never say never, but it's never the good thing to do to reprimand kids in public. It's disrespectful. And so pull them aside, let them know that, we have something to say and that I don't want to do this in front of your kids. The lower the decibels, the better, clear, and the fewer the words, the better, as opposed to the words that I've just used 5 billion words during this talk. Invite comment about both the child's affective and cognitive responses. In other words, respond to the feelings behind some of the things that the kids are saying, that, when they may say something that is an outlandish statement that is not a reflection of reality, but it shows frustration and sadness, don't correct the erroneous statement as much as, that is making you really frustrated. And I know when you get frustrated, it's really hard for you to stay focused, blah, 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 those sorts of things. Respond less to the inaccuracy of the statement. And a lot of times the kids will come back to a more accurate statement as the conversation goes on. It's kind of a miraculous thing when that happens. Check for mutual agreement on your facts. Give the child a turn to speak on your schedule. It's important that we are the ones who are controlling the situation, but we are a very benevolent controller, that we want our kids to participate, that we know we're grown-ups, we've had different experience. We know how to set these conversations on a path that is the most productive. And so we have to make sure that the kids know that it's us. And then have a closure and summary, that you both say, okay, this is what I took from this. What do you take from this conversation? Then create a solution-oriented goal, articulate a goal. From this problem, articulate a goal, brainstorm possible solutions. With this kid yesterday, we talked about ways that he could study. Could he actually, do a study group with other kids? Could he, start studying a few days earlier? Those sorts of things. Rather than chastising the error, move forward toward a solution. Anticipates possible snags. I mean, things are not going to go perfectly. There are going to be times that the best laid plans are going to go awry, and prepare for that. I said, what are we going to do when this doesn't work out? Right? Set a time for a progress check and assess the process and adjust as needed. I don't know what it says at the top there, but these are some things that sort of are kind of rules of thumb, that when we want to create an atmosphere in our family, in our classroom, on our team, whatever we're doing, that accentuates the positive. These are some things that are good tips to keep in mind. Communicate and live by, which means demonstrate values of responsibility, accountability, and independence. And that means use the words. When kids demonstrate that they're being responsible, let them know. I said, you know what? There were times when I would have a hard time relying that if I asked you a couple of times to do something, you'd get it done. You just showed a different level of responsibility when you did that after, right there. I really appreciate that. And accountability, so that when we set kids up on a plan that has them perform certain responsibilities and contributions to the families, not chores. Let's, make sure that they're accountable for that, and let them know that, sometimes we always want to check, but maybe we don't want to check first. So, you know, I'm going to come up and check your room. Why don't you go up there first? And you know what I'll look at to see if that's going to be done, and then go do that. So that the kids they've had a chore. I just used the bad word. I have to put a quarter in the bottle. They have a responsibility. You ask them to meet it. You're going to hold them accountable for that. Give them an opportunity to fix it before they go do it. And independence. That, we love it when our kids are independent and they do things that demonstrate independence and responsibility. Focus on the cans rather than the can-nots. These are the things that they can do. Like, for example, if a kid has a hard time pulling himself away from a video game, say, when you respond the second time, after your second reminder, and 2 reminders are fair for our kids, these are the things that you're going to be able to do. That makes sense. Provide opportunities for the child to reach rather than shouldering the responsibility of pushing them. Give them something that they can aspire to. Make it in the family something that is praiseworthy and obviously positively acknowledged for them to do these sorts of things, setting the table, doing the dishes, whatever it's going to be. Let them see that, yeah, there's some goodies, even attitudinal goodies. Our kids are very receptive to that when they feel as though we are feeling positively toward them rather than getting a lollipop or something like that. View tasks as processes rather than a single performance. That gives us an opportunity to praise kids and acknowledge kids along the path to accomplishment and along the path to achievement. Because when we wait for our kids to achieve goals, our kids can be erratic performers. There's a lot of praise deficit time or praise dead time between the time that they start and the time that they finish. We need to be encouraging along that path. When selecting target skills with the child, start small, start with shoe-ins for success, and state it succinctly. It's really important that when we are going over goals with kids, that make them small first. Don't make them, you're going to be the cleaner, you're going to be the vacuumer of the house. Well, maybe down the line, that's something that will be a good match for the kids. But let's say, you know what, I want you to vacuum this room, watch how I do it, and then I'll watch how you do it, and then you do it. So start small. Start with things that are going to be easily achievable. You don't want to do sort of the Olympic level goal for kids from the get-go. You want them to be able to do it, and state it succinctly, make it clear. And also tune into the effort as much as the end product. And that's what we're talking about, is viewing this as a process. Let the kids know that we are acknowledging and appreciating the effort that they're putting in. And I believe that that's it. And I did it 5 minutes early in time for questions and answers. So.
Wonderful, Dave. Thank you so much.
Okay.
I love hearing you talk. I always learn something every time you come.
There's a lot of words, that's for sure.
But good words, lots of good
I
stuff.
hope so.
I do have a question for you, and it's about adult children, so like over 20 years old.
Yep.
Can you provide some tips about how to enforce consequences with students that may be living at home that are older than 18?
It really depends upon the independence level that they have, number one, and it depends upon what motivates them. For example, if you have somebody living in your home who's an older kid, who's a socially reluctant kid, and they are not demonstrating a level of independence that you're confident that they're able to show, or not meeting responsibilities that you're confident that they're able to meet, probably not the best thing to say, okay, that's it, you can't go out. The kid's gonna say, yay, that's perfect for me, because I don't go out anyways. And so you kind of have to engage with an adult child first about what you're seeing, what the problem is. That's when you talk about clearly articulating the problem so that you both know what the issue is. Engage with the kid to the degree that he or she can engage about it, what he thinks the solution would be. and make sure that he understands your position and you understand his position. And then devise some set of sort of motivations. You know, these are some things that will, when this happens, then this can happen in a good way. And as sort of a negative motivator, that understand that when these things don't happen this way, or when this happens, which are not responsible behaviors and not independent behaviors, then these other things that you've become accustomed to are not going to happen. Does that make any sense? But I think it's engaging the adult kids in the process in a different way from the way that you engage a 10, 12, 15-year-old. Make sense?
Yes, thank you, Dave. Okay, we have another question in the chat. How do I get my son out of bed and off the computer? He spends the whole day doing this. Any advice?
Well, I think, again, step one is kind of articulate the problem with your kids. He is kind of fully understand that there is another perspective that is valid, that says time on a computer is not particularly healthy. It's not particularly enriching. It's not particularly advancing. He knows that. He's going to tell you that he disagrees, but he knows that. There are things that he should know about parental controls that, you know, you think that is more helpful for kids to be off their computer for a particular amount of time and engaged in other activities rather than just saying off the computer, engaged in other activities. That's an important family value, that we are outside sometimes, that we are engaging with other people sometimes, that we think that is really, really important, that we are, you know, engaged in some sort of curiosity and some sort of learning that's different from what we get on a screen. And so we really feel that limiting screen time is important. Ask him to weigh in on that, see what he thinks about it. Expect that he's going to disagree. But, you know, then you can say, well, we really think that is important. We have a different opinion about that. And these are things that we value as a family. And so these are going to be things that are going to happen. What do you think is a reasonable time for you to be able to stay on the computer? And he will say forever. And we will say, well, we disagree. And so we set up a time that is what we think is going to be reasonable, and maybe add a half an hour to it. And say that, you know, I think that this is a reasonable amount of time. I'm not a computer guy. I don't, you know this stuff about, you know, I'm not into the games or those sorts of things. So I'm going to add a half an hour with the understanding that I feel differently about this to you. But I really do think that when we say it's time to end, it's time to end. And when would be a time that you would want me to remind you? Half hour before, 15 minutes before, 5 minutes before, all of the above, so that you can get off in a reasonable time. That's a good thing. And when he does it, praise it. And when he doesn't, and if he doesn't, go back to the agreement. Remember that this was the amount of time with that. And we do have the ability to shut this stuff off. I don't want to do that because it's a pain in the neck, but understand that is a possibility. So put him in a position to be able to meet your expectations, explain what the situation is clearly, expect that it's important that he understands your perspective, not that he agrees with that, and then set up some, you know, when, then sort of things for that. Yes, hopefully.
Yes, wonderful. Okay, here's a question that I can completely relate to because I still feel like I have to call my college kids and make sure they're brushing their teeth. For 18 plus children, how do you go back and retrain them to brush their teeth, shower, or basic hygiene without insulting them?
There are a lot of times when the steady drumbeat of encouragement and reasons for positive hygiene and all of those things come from us, to the degree that it doesn't, they've kind of tuned us out. When there were kids at school who were my kids, and they would come into school not particularly well groomed, and maybe a little bit more aromatic than they wanted to be. Hearing from their advisor and hearing from their parent, blah, 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 I'd involve the school nurse and say, okay, these are some of the reasons that we do these sorts of things. And so I would, it's not abdicating responsibility, it's adding to the troops. When if it's a particular question of dental hygiene, it's, okay, this is where you are right now in terms of your teeth, in terms of the health of your teeth. This is what you need to do in order to avoid extractions or gum things or those sorts of things. Get sort of another voice to talk about that as well. That can be helpful, if that makes any sense. And just, the regular hygiene, it's, sort of, I don't know, to make statements about just cleanliness and sort of an observing way rather than a judgmental way. I'm wondering if you don't have enough clean shirts, because I've seen that that shirt for a month or two. Those sorts of things. And at some point say, I wonder if, I know that I can be a nudge about these sorts of things. I wonder if your friends and other people tune into, cleanliness and hygiene in the same way that I do. And bring it up as a topic, because they may not think that that's the case, but it might plant the seed. It's a tough one. It's a tough one.
Thank you for that, Dave.
Sure.
So here's a question about sibling rivalry, and you kind of weave in there the special needs, which is always difficult. My son is 16 and dyslexic, has 2 siblings who don't have disabilities. He's very jealous, and it's getting hard to manage their relationship. When he's unkind, his sister and brother want me to punish him. I don't want to punish him. What is the best way to manage this type of situation?
First of all, common that, our kids realize that in the family, compliance, achievement, accomplishment, those things are all important. And as much as we know that our kids with LD are making improvement, they know that their improvements don't measure up to those of their siblings. And so that gets them frustrated and gets them mad. And when kids feel embarrassed, embarrassed is one of those feelings that morphs very quickly into anger. And when people get angry, then they say words that are not so great. One of the best things that we can do as a family is to educate, is to let the family know what a learning disability is, and let them know that it's not just, what other people think is just not reversing letters, that what comes with having dyslexia is a buildup of frustration and negative feelings about ourselves and feelings of not measuring up and all of that stuff that builds up over time and really has an effect on the way people think and the way that people feel. And, there's the Fat City video, for example, Rick LaVoy's Fat City video. It's entertaining, but it's also enlightening for everybody in the family to see and maybe relate to what that experience has been for the kid with LD. And hopefully with education comes empathy and understanding. And that goes for the rest of the family, besides the kid with the learning disability, for sure. But he needs to know as well that there's an impact to his words. And though we understand the frustration, though we understand where the anger comes from, this particular manifestation of that is not acceptable in this family. We have standards about the way that we talk and the words that we use, and help him deal with frustration, some mindfulness stuff. That when you begin to get frustrated, when you begin to feel sort of embarrassed and those sorts of things, there are some things that we can do related to breathing. go get, go for a walk, do some things that are positive things in response to these feelings that I would love to say are not going to happen, but they're going to happen. You're going to experience these feelings. There are just different ways that you can respond to them. You can't, feelings happen. We can manage the way that we respond to them. And it's important that he or she, the person with special needs in the family, understand that there are kind of certain standards to the way that we respond. So education and developing opportunities for the kid with special needs to be able to develop different ways to respond to feelings.
Thank you, Dave. I also want to be mindful of your time because I know you have many little and big people who need you. We've got about 4 more questions. Are you able to answer them? Okay.
Of course.
So how would you approach the situation when the child is not focusing on doing his homework and we want him to be more responsible?
It depends upon how old the kid is, but there are some general things for that. What we can provide as families for our kids is provide a place that the kids find to be minimally distracting. It's not what we would find to be minimally distracting. It's what the kids would find to be minimally distracting. Some kids find that when they are doing homework on the kitchen table, the bustle around them, the action around them actually is kind of white noise for them. And that is soothing as much as anything else. Sometimes kids need dead silence of their room with headphones on to make sure that they're not hearing anything, to provide that sort of minimally distracting environment for them. And so check and talk with the kids about what they think the best place would be. And then, as we talked about on that last slide, try it out and see if that works. See if they really find that they're able to produce more work in a shorter period of time than they were before. And if it happens, then that's great. If it doesn't happen, let's regroup and find a different thing. So we do that. We can also ask kids to how we can be helpful. Do they find it better when we are totally divorced from the situation? Or do they find it better when we come in and check every 15 minutes? Some kids like the contact of a person who's coming in and asks that. A lot of kids don't. But reminders on time intervals is something that we do. I mean, that's an important thing for us to do. So, just have a little timer sometimes. And sometimes it can be a big one of those clocks that if you set the time for 20 minutes, it gets red, and then the red gradually gets smaller and smaller and smaller as the time. And then have the kids check, okay, how much have I done in that 20 minutes? Sometimes it's 5 minutes, to be able to help him stay focused that way. Another thing would be to, if he can tolerate, you're going over his homework with him from his assignment pad or whatever they have now. They don't have assignment pads anymore, I'm showing my age, but say, okay, you've got this in math. Look at the worksheet. How long do you think that's going to take you? Just make a guess. Boom, and then put that amount on the top of the paper. How long do you think this writing assignment is going to take you? How long do you think that's going to take you? If the kids think this is an executive function thing, if the kids can sort of visualize what that time might be, and they have it right in the top of the page, that can be something that's going to hold their attention in a different way. And it also allows them to see what kind of measurer and what kind of guesser they are. If the math they thought was going to be 15 minutes took them 7 minutes, and then tomorrow it's the same sort of thing, that's a good thing for them to know. And it's also a good thing for them to see a collection of random homework assignments as being able to be chunked into individual time things. And so those are 3 things. I could go on for more, but I don't know that I really think that that's the best idea.
Okay. Any tips for breaking a 13-year-old who is quite dependent on electronics? Is a regimented daily chart with times necessary? This is a tough one because as they get older, the electronics are all part of the process in school, right?
Sure. No, that's true. I think more and more, particularly with the COVID era Zoom world, in school, kids are getting really accustomed to being on screens, and I am not anti-screen. I am anti only screen. Only screen, that screens are the only form of entertainment. And I think that that's when it's a good idea to have that sort of family talk about the things that we value, that we do value physical activity, that we do value, engaging in some sort of, for want of a better word, a hobby, whether it's a musical instrument or art or woodworking or helping out outside, whatever it is. These are the things that we value. And so we want to make sure that everybody in the family is participating in one of these. What it looks like to individual kids, I don't care about that. I don't care about that. As long as it's active in its orientation, that there's some time that's going to be outside, and sometimes it's going to be creative and learning something different. And so we want to be able to have those values be part of your day, like screen time is. I would not choose to do screen time, but if you choose to use screen time, that's fine. One of the things that you can do, but understand that there are other things that we need to do as well. And that the limitation of screen time is something important. In the same way that, if you wanted to paint, for 12 hours a day, instead of other things, we would encourage you to do something different from that. And so live by that value. Let them know that everybody in the family values varied experiences, and we want you to be able to vary your experience as well. And again, talk about, what do you think is a reasonable amount of time? What sort of reminders do you want for that? And that, let's work with this and see how it works, if that makes sense.
Okay, so a similar question to one asked: if a child on an IEP with learning disabilities has a high achieving sibling, both in and out of school, he often seems to be jealous and misbehaving when we compliment the sibling. How do we handle this?
That's again, it happens all the time. And I think it's a question of, when kids feel that parents recognize achievement in other people and not recognize their growth and progress and effort and courage, which is differently manifest in kids who have special needs from the kids who are neurotypical kids, then there's that jealousy that sets in. And so part of it is our being able to be differently responsive to our kids, sometimes in public, sometimes in private. The discussion with our kids that, and best when it's best time to talk to kids, when you're driving and there's no eye contact, sometimes when the kids get ready for bed and those sorts of things, to be able to talk about the fact that that we muse sometimes at the life that our kids with special needs have. And we sometimes think about the hardships that go with it, but we don't always think about the resilience that our kids develop because of the experiences that they have, that we don't recognize the courage that it takes to get their butts out of bed and go to school every day when they know that there's going to be something frustrating that happens to them in school, or maybe they feel teased by other kids. There's bravery that's involved with that there's resourcefulness that they show when other kids may be able to float through things, and it doesn't float the same way for them, and there are difficulties and problems, and they've had to learn how to deal with these things in a different way from their siblings have had to. And we just want to let you know that we appreciate that and we acknowledge that. That can be a delicate conversation to have with our kids, because our kids are not oftentimes used to having us point, or having anybody point to the positive elements of their special needs, and they may be resistive to that too. I said, I just need to say this because I think it's so important, and I have to let you know the degree of pride that I have, and you're managing the way that you are managing it. at this particular point. It may not be perfect right now. It may not be the ideal situation for you right now, but boy, this has been a tough road to hoe for you, and you've done some great work. That sometimes can be an antidote to the praise that other kids are getting. You notice that I didn't say stop praising the other kids. They're your kids too, and they need to have some stuff acknowledged as well.
Oh, Dave, if everyone could have you in their house for a little bit each day. it'd be a
Oh,
much better
you
world.
asked my wife, they'd go crazy. They'd go crazy.
We have a couple more questions. For a 15-year-old who just will not do basic household tasks like hang up wet towels, what can we do? We've tried everything. Please let us know.
Yeah, I think, it is tough, and some of these things sound so good and so easy to implement on paper, and I know full well that they're not. I used to advise parents to set up like responsibilities charts and those sorts of things in their homes, and we started to do the same things in our house. And I'm a horrible chart person. I'm not a chart person myself. I make a grocery list and lose the grocery list. It's not the way that it works for me. And so if you've tried the chart things and you've refined the chart things, both from a frequency of acknowledgement of approaching the behavior that you want, and staggering the reinforcement schedule, and making sure that the reinforcements and the motivators are things that your kids prize. And if that doesn't work, then you can do some if then sorts of things. If these things happen, then these positive things will come your way. If they don't happen, then some of the things that you're accustomed to, some of the things that you have liked to do, they're just not going to be available to you in the same way. Do you think that you can do, ask the kids, am I asking too much of you to make you bed? Or whatever their chore happens to be. If they say yes, and they say, great, let's go make your bed. Let's work on making the bed, or let's set the table. Let's do these sorts of things. I'm on the webinar. So that I am, I'm going to be assured that I'm asking you to do something that I know that you can do. And so make sure of that, and then just ask them to do that. Remember to start small. State it specifically, check frequently, give praise when there's things that happen. And then if that really doesn't work and you get a kid who needs a little bit of a negative reinforcement to stop this resistance, and to stop, because negative reinforcement stops behavior, it doesn't change behavior. You want to change it, but sometimes you need to stop the resistance first, and then just leverage it with some of the things that the kids want to do, and say, this is not the way I want. I don't want my house, our home, to be a home that is filled with negative consequences for people. That's not comfortable for you. It's not comfortable for me. I didn't buy into this job to be a professional nag. I'm not going to do that. But this is one of the things we value in this family. Contributing is one of the things that we all do, and you see everybody contributing, and it's time that you learn to be able to be a contributor and independently contributor as best we can. So.
And a couple more questions here. What do you think about using an approach where you provide motivators like payment for chores around the house? I'm thinking of apps like Greenlight that encourage kids to learn value of different tasks and then use money they earn or invest to their app as well. Please provide some insight.
Oh, I think it's a great idea. I think I don't know about that particular app, and so I may say that's a great idea, but I don't know anything about the app. But the concept is okay. I think when we it takes an hour to cut the grass, but I look outside and it's a nice grass. That's my reinforcement. I don't need payment for that anymore, like I did when I was a kid doing it for other people. The important thing is to stagger that schedule. When you want to tie motivator or a reward to a behavior, what you want to do is start the habit of behaving in that way rolling. And so initially it's, they do the behavior, you reward it. They do the behavior, they reward it. You do the behavior and they reward it. And so along with the reward comes praise from you, comes acknowledgement from you, comes your kids hearing you talk about how well the job was done to other people. There are a lot of different ways that we can acknowledge this. And then you do that for a while and you say, okay, I'm gonna up the ante, but I'm gonna pay the new ante for every 3 days of doing it or 2 days of doing it. So you sort of stretch out the time between payments and the time between rewards. And so the kids are doing the behavior during those intervals without getting direct rewards. And that's going to reinforce the habit of that. And then they get the reward at the end, and you just continue to stretch that out. And then you can change the reward to something, from something physical, like money, to like a trip where we get to go to your favorite restaurant, or we get to do those sorts of things. So it is less tangible and more kind of a reward to do that. So yes, tagging rewards to behaviors, particularly when kids are just learning how to do something, is a great thing to do. We need to be smart about the way that we manipulate the schedule of reinforcement, the intervals that we expect kids to perform before they get, and to be able to manipulate the rewards that their kids are getting.
And one final question, what do you do when your adult child is simply non-compliant and just tells you to leave? Any advice?
Again, not knowing the capacity and the capabilities of that particular adult child, it's hard to say what we know, what to do about this. I always fall back on, and this is going to sound so lame, it falls back on communicating with the person. That there seems to be expectations and resistance, expectations and resistance, expectations and resistance, and it's going nowhere. Sometimes, and there's a big sometimes in this, to be able to step back from the individual areas of conflict, to have a more general discussion about, the way that we want this home to be. From your adult child's perspective, it's important to know that what he or she wants, what is her vision or his vision of what he wants. And then it's important for you to tell yours about the way that you have at home, and also to be able to talk about, it is really important that this capable person, in a number of ways, maybe not supremely capable in all ways, but capable person in a number of ways, is able to capitalize on those capabilities and be able to demonstrate and practice those capabilities for the time that he or she are going to be living alone. And so have kind of an overview discussion with your adult child, and sometimes setting the stage for that discussion is really challenging as well, because if you have a resistant kid, he's not going to engage in that. But if he knows that you want to have a discussion, as opposed to a listing of the infractions, you make it a differently willing partner in that discussion, and let the adult boy or girl know that he's going to have a chance to talk as well, and you're going to demonstrate that you're understanding what he's saying and empathizing with the feelings, and maybe gently, sensitively, empathically, firmly stating your different opinion, if that makes sense.
I think we've asked and answered all questions. I don't see
I
any.
know they've been
one
asked. I don't
more.
know if they've been answered, but
I think there's one more from Margaret. in
Eve, I
the
don't see it. If you see it, can
chat.
you ask it?
I don't see it either.
If there's one other question, maybe you could just type it into the chat real quick, because it looks like everything's been.
Or they can just send me an email too. That would be fine. Because I think, did I put my email on that thing, Bob?
No,
Yes, I
maybe
did.
at the beginning.
There it
Yes, I
is.
did.
Oh,
Okay, good. Oh, you know what,
Okay.
Eve? I didn't do it on yours, I don't think. So.
oh,
no,
okay,
thank you.
that's
Yeah,
okay.
this is a new one just in the sense of the front page. I'm sorry. So yeah, just send me an email. That's fine. That'd be great.
I'm just scrolling through to make sure we've covered everything. Let's see. Okay, one more question, Dave, sorry.
That's okay.
Student who is 18 with expressive receptive language issues, what can we do to help him? He's in boarding school, so forced into more interactions, but he still avoids.
So he's 18, so that would put him maybe as a senior or a junior. And if he's at a boarding school that prizes and says that it's really important to get all their kids engaged, and I'm assuming that maybe this school is for other kids like your son or daughter. I can't remember if it was a son or daughter. That's an important thing. In the same way that we were resources when we were that school at Eagle Hill, but Hardwick and Greenwich and at Southport as well. I think you can call the school to talk with them about the techniques that they have used to keep your child engaged and the degree of a success that they have experienced there, what their plan is moving forward to either encourage greater interactions with other kids or different interactions with other kids, and some suggestions as to how you might be able to incorporate that at home. We loved serving that role for families when we were in the school and still do. And so that would be one thing. Another thing would be understanding that you can't create a school environment when you're home, when your kids are at home, and they don't need a school environment at home. But hopefully some of the concepts that they use at school will be things that you can do. Some of the things that we used to do would be, scheduling, that we would work with our kids and develop a schedule as to, what sorts of things they were going to do with their time during that day. And in the same way that we talked before about the things that their family values, that there are going to be some things that are going to be outside, exposed to other people. We can't force interaction, but we can sort of encourage and orchestrate time where our kids are with other people. We can also ask for different activities that our kids want to be able to do. We kind of know what things they like to do and don't like to do, and maybe do some forced choice things. Say, okay, I know that you like to do these 3 things. Let's pick one of them to do during some particular block of time over the course of the weekend, because it fits in with what we value in terms of time that we spend with other people. So talk to the school first, see what their plan is, see how they have felt that they've been able to succeed, what their plan is going forward, and do they have any suggestions of things that we can do.
Thank you, Dave. I know it's 11:30. There's one more question that popped up. Do you have time for that? Okay.
Of course.
How to stop physical negative behavior for 13-year-old who has LD, ADHD, executive function, and auditory processing when being asked to do something she does not want to do?
Okay. Again, there's so many. It depends. Is it academic? Is it in terms of family interactions? Everything over the sun. If there tends to be an adverse reaction when we ask one of our kids to do something out of the blue, when there's a change of plans or something like that out of the blue. And that's when the reactions happen. Then we can talk with the kid and say that, you know what, I noticed that when something unexpected happens with you, that causes you great frustration. When I say that it's time to stop watching TV and go up and do your homework or come to dinner and those sorts of things, when I do that sort of as a surprise, that's frustrating for you and it makes you angry. Let's talk about sort of a reminder system or getting you ready for the change and preparing you for that, if that's one of the reasons. If the resistance and the explosion comes from, the kid is just resistant to do the things that you're asking her to do, whether it's homework or those sorts of things, then sort of a talk about expectations and why we have expectations is something that's important to engage with her. She's obviously feels very strongly about this. I'm not sure that I really understand where the strong feeling comes from. Tell me why you feel strongly that this shouldn't happen in the way that we feel that it happens, and just to hear what their perception is. And sometimes the kids say, well, I really don't know, it just makes me mad. And I say, okay, I can understand that, but if there's really nothing wrong with it, let's see if we can do something different. So I think engagement is really an important precursor to what we're going to do, either in a positive way to encourage compliance and encourage a change in the way that these responses are coming to us, or it's an important precursor when we begin to leverage some of the things that our kids want to do, leverage some of those things if they continue to less than reasonably not comply with what we want them to know. So that the conversation is important first, to be able to get an understanding as to where the resistance is coming from, and then sort of talk about what the expectations are, both positive and negative.
Wow. So we had lots of thank yous and one who said this was the best session they ever attended. So
There you go.
Well, first of all, you have to go to more sessions. That's obvious. Yeah, thank you.
That's so awesome.
I think that's a good way to end. Thank you so much.
There's one thing I wanted to say, Dave. It seems like there's a lot of questions about older kids and young adults, which I don't think we anticipated.
Sure.
And maybe that's something that we could think about doing in the future to focus on that.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important thing. I have to say, it is not something that I'm more familiar with. I am more familiar with school stuff, but obviously there's a need for discussion about these sorts of things. So yeah, it was something that absolutely we can talk about. Okay, great.
Thanks everybody, and check out.
Thank you guys for coming. It's really busy. I really appreciate you taking your time out of your day to do this.
Okay, thanks everybody.
Okay. Take care.
Bye.